We had a downstairs occasion, your side, so we had to go down and participate, unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever it is. So now we're going to start a little bit late, but what I wanted to discuss tonight is how, in our religion, the Torah is the central theme of the whole world and the whole religion of the whole world, the whole culture, the whole Jewish people. The whole world is built on that. It's built on the Torah. So, we have that corroborate that support that make this very, very, very apparent, and very, just to start right a little bit to get things rolling. It says in the biblical verse, where is this written in the Tehillim? Im lo briti yomam v'layla chukot hashamayim v'aretz lo samti. Right? It's actually in Jeremiah. That's where it is. It's in Jeremiah. That's what it says. What does that mean? If it wasn't for my covenant, day and night, I wouldn't have placed the laws of the world. I wouldn't have made the world. So what it means to say is that Kadosh Baruch Hu only created the world for the Torah. That's the only reason He had to create the world. What does that mean? That the Torah should be studied, the Torah should be learned, the Torah should be pondered, the Torah should be it should be discovered by people. It should be investigated, right? And people should be contemplating the Torah all the time. This is all what the world is about. The great sages, as it says in the Torah, it's when we read Kriyat Shema, it says Uvlechtecha baderech. So what does that mean? That we have to study the Torah also when you're going on the road. So they consider it so important. The sages, when they used to walk and go on the road, they used to study also when they were walking, when they were traveling as well, right? So what does that mean? Like, they say Rav Shach was alive in this generation, passed away about 10 years ago. When he used to go, like, to the post office, what was he doing? He was with his headphones, listening to some music, some Van Halen, something like that. What was he doing? He was studying Torah on the way as well. He was contemplating some things which are in the Torah, something which we found fascinating, something which was difficult, something which needed more thought, more contemplation. This is what people were doing when they were traveling. So what does that mean? That the Torah is so important. He has to be studying all the time, whether he's sitting in the house, is going on the road, or whatever he may be doing. As long as he has like a free moment to some time to contemplate, or just to read some simple words of Torah, some verses. Like the Rabbi used to tell us, right? Maran, Rabbi used to tell us, when you stand at the bus stop, what are you doing at that time, right? You should be studying Torah, he says. Okay, so maybe you don't have some sources, but what you can do is you can just, read Tehillim or read some things from the prayers, which are also from the Torah. These verses, the Psuke de Zimra, all kinds of things like this. A person should be always doing Torah anywhere he goes. Why is that? Because the religion, the Jewish religion is not some kind of a man-made thing. This is from God, when you have the words of God, and this is the word for, so you have to be constantly doing this all the time, day and night, right, non-stop, no breaks. Unless you need to do something, you need to eat a little bit or whatever, you need to go to the bathroom, excuse the expression, or you need to sleep or whatever it is. Okay, fine, go. But besides that, all the free time that you have, person has to devote to Torah. Why is that? Because this is the reason why Kadosh Baruch Hu created the world. He didn't create the world for anything else, not for politics, who's going to be the president, who's going to be the prime minister, who's going to be that. Who cares? You think this really matters to anybody? They're all the same, this one comes, this one goes, this one will be a little bit better, this one will be a little bit worse, right? So it's one, two, several variations on. People really care about this, Who did he choose, for the vice president? He chose the camel girl, the camela, the camel, or he chose the donkey or the jackass, Who cares? They're all the same. What difference does it make? This is the idea, what I mean? I understand that. So in the Zohar Kadosh, it also goes very strong and teaches us about how important the Torah is. So what is Kadosh about the Torah? It says that number one, it's really like we call it Etz HaHaimhi. It's the tree of life. That's what the verse says. So when it says it's the tree of life, the Torah, that means to say that Zohar Kadosh understands it like this: when you're studying Torah, you're plugged into life. You're in life. You're living. When you're not studying Torah, it's like you're dead. You're plunging out of the source of life. You know what I mean? So Torah and not Torah, It's a matter of life and death, and this is the reason why we're commanded as Jews to constantly being striving in Torah. Right? No matter where you are, no matter where you may be, wherever you are, in the field, in the desert, right? Whatever it is, they say that Chacham Ben Zion Abashed Rabbi Ben Zion, he was one of the great sages of our generation, and he got, when he towards the end of his life, he got very ill. So he was having excruciating pains, and he was in the hospital, lying flat on some bed or whatever it is, right? Some kind of a thing, just lying there, when he's just lying there in the hospital, staring at the ceiling, he's in pain. Maybe looking at the TV screen over there, with some TV, whatever. He wasn't doing that. What was he doing? He was learning Rambam, right? At that time, when he was lying on the bed, he wasn't just, dreaming, counting sheep. He was learning the Rambam. He knew the Rambam by heart. The whole Rambam he knew by heart. Can you imagine? This is a very big body of work. The Rambam. Huge, colossal. It takes most people to finish the Rambam. If you do one chapter a day, it takes 3 years to finish. If you do 3 chapters a day, you finish it in 1 year. So he was just he knew all the thing by heart, and reading the Rambam, like verse by verse, halacha by halacha. This is what he was doing. Why is that? What's the reason why? Because again, right, this is the world functions on that. The Torah is life. So if you're in the Torah, you're in life. If you're not in the Torah, you're not in life. So just to make you understand how important, again, right, just from the sources of the Pirkei Avot. So what does it say in the Pirkei Avot? The first chapter, it says many things about the Torah, Pirkei Avot. So it says like this, right? That on three things the world stands. Right? What are they? One of them is Torah. Right? The other one is Gemilut Chasadim and Avodah. So how do we say this? Right? It goes like this. Shimon HaTzadik Hayom, Misharech Chesed HaGedolah. Shimon HaTzadik said, he was one of the big great rabbis. On 3 things the world stands. What does that mean, stands? If it was, destroy the world. The world wouldn't exist, So why do you think, by the way, today we're having all these problems, anarchy, looting, all these things, no control, total disarray, no, everybody's breaking the law, everybody's just no order. Why is that? Because people aren't learning Torah enough. Because when they shut down all the yeshivot, they shut down all the synagogues, all the Torah study was shut down also, most of it. So because of that, the world is having a problem existing the way it is. This is the problem. This is the problem that we have. If people were learning Torah like they used to before this whole disease came, this virus, it wouldn't happen today. What happened with all the anarchy, with all the murders, the shootings, people being killed left and right like flies. What's the reason that? Because the Torah is what supports the world. And that place becomes destroyed, becomes nullified. Because the world stands on Torah. This is what the Pirkei Avot is telling you, it's not a joke. So what are the other 2 things that it stands on? Avodah and Gemilut Chasadim. What does that mean? Acts of kindness, Gemilut Chasadim, and Avodah, the service which was in the Bet HaMikdash. Today we don't have that. So what do we have instead? The prayers. The prayers come in place of the service in Bet HaMikdash. So on those 3 things, it says Pirkei Avot, the world stands on those 3 things. So without the Torah, the world cannot stand. This is the idea, So let's go on a little bit, right, to see exactly what we find over here in the Pirkei Avot regarding words of Torah. So look what it says, right? I'll tell you. הוא היה אומר, נגד שמה, עבד שמה, ודלה מוסיף יאסף, ודלה יליף כתלה חייב. So look what it says, unbelievable, right? This is Pirkei Avot. It says that whoever doesn't add to his knowledge of Torah, he just sits easy and okay, whatever I learned, now, take a vacation for a while, I'm not interested in adding any more Torah. So what does it say about him? He will leave the world. He'll leave the world. He doesn't even deserve to be in the world. If a person doesn't add to his knowledge of Torah on a regular basis, the world is better. There's nothing for him to do over here. This is the idea. Whoever doesn't add to his Torah knowledge, he's going to be eventually taken from the world. Again, it says, right, and a person doesn't learn, he's liable to death. Just because of the fact that he doesn't learn Torah. Because this is the reason why the world exists. So if you're not doing that, you're not in the world, you're somewhere else, you're in a different place altogether. That's the idea. Pirkei Avot. Okay, let's go on Pirkei Avot. I want to tell you some more things over here. So again, right, it says Pirkei Avot in the second chapter, Marbe Torah, Marbe Chaim. A person who increases Torah, increases life. That, in other words, the function of Torah, the more you do in Torah, the more life you have. Life comes from there. That's where it comes from. As we said, right, the Zohar Kadosh says, either you're plugged in or you're not plugged in. You're plugged in, you're in life. You're not plugged into the Torah, that's not life at all. That's the idea. Very, very, strong words we have over here with these, right? So again, look what it says again. If he acquires the words of Torah in this world, he acquires the world to come as well, How does a person acquire the world to come? By studying Torah, right? It says in the Gemara something a little bit more comprehensive about that. It says, Rabbi Yochanan says in Masechet Tanit, it says over there that there are two types of people who have the portion of the world to come. The ones who study Torah and the ones who support the Torah. Why? Because there are some who cannot study for some reason or another. Let's say they're not proficient, whatever, they don't have a chance. Or they don't have time, let's say they're working all the time, whatever. So if either you study the Torah or you support the Torah. If a person doesn't have any of those, for what do you want to go to Olam Haba? For what in the world to come? What do you want to be there for? For what? For playing, playing with matchsticks? What? For smoking cigarettes? There's no other thing that gets you to Olam Haba. Either you learn the Torah or you support the Torah. So again, we see, right, that a person who learns Torah, he gets this world and he gets the world to come as well. Okay, very good. Goes on to say, look now what it says. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he says, Im lamata Torah, he says, if you learned a lot of Torah, right, don't think you're a big hotshot, like something like that. Why is that? What's the reason why? There's no reason for you to get arrogant. Why? Because, you shouldn't think like you did something special out of this world, Why? So it's very simple. That's what you were created for, So if you were created to do something, it goes without saying. Since you were created to study Torah, so you have to learn Torah, and there's nothing to get arrogant about. There's nothing to get haughty about. There's nothing to for. This is your job, It comes in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. He makes bagels every day, So what is he going to go home and say, to his wife, oh, I made bagels today. I'm so proud of myself. That's your job. What are you proud of? That's your job. That's how you make a living. So Torah is our job. So what are you proud of? What you study Torah? There's nothing to be proud of. This is what you were created for. So there's it's not an ego trip, the Torah. That's not what it's supposed to be. You know what I mean? That's the idea. Okay, very good. Goes on to say even more. Pirkei Avot. Unbelievable. Rabbi Elazar אומר, הווה שקוד ללמוד תורה, ודע מה שתשיב לאפיקורוס. ודע לפני מי אתה עמל, ומי הוא בא למלאכתך שישלם לך שכר פעולתך. So he says also another thing he points out right over here, that another reason why a person has to be, working in Torah, toiling in Torah, why? Because if some heretic comes to argue with him, if he has all the tools to answer properly, so he can answer. But if he's lacking that knowledge, so the heretic will overcome him. They'll say, you see like that, and he won't be able to answer. He won't be able to find the solution to what he's asking about. This is also one of the reasons why a person has to be very careful about that. But besides that, so he says, look what he says, right? V'da lifnei mi ata. Who are you working for? When you study Torah, you're working for God. You know what I mean? This is God's work. It's God's labor. So what does that mean? He's going to be able to pay you for your time, for your labor. He'll pay you very, very, very well, very generously for your labor, if you study Torah. Also in this world and also in the world to come as well. That's the idea. So then it goes on to say another thing, which we know. So he says, when it comes to Torah, it's like, it's not like you've got a job and you've got to finish a certain job. Because you never finish the Torah. You know what I mean? There's always more to learn. So you're never finished with the Torah. So therefore, it's not a matter of like, how much did I do? That's not the issue. The issue is, were you doing it like all the time when you had free time? Where this is what you're doing, or you were doing something else? Because if you're doing it when you have free time, it doesn't matter how much you did, because you did whatever you could do. But since you took all the time that you could to do Torah, so therefore you get rewarded like that. Hashem considers it like you did a full day's work. That's the idea.
Nice.
You did a full day's work.
Always nice.
God bless you. All the best. All the best. God bless you. Derech Shalom.
Derech Shalom.
Amen. So again, right, as we said, that it's not how much you do, it's how long you're doing it, right? That's the idea. They pay you for your time, not for your performance, not for how much you finished. That's not the issue. The issue is, did you try as hard as you could? That's the issue. That's what he's telling you, right? So he says, even though you're not really required to finish the Torah because you never will, but nevertheless, on the other hand, you're not allowed to stop learning. You'll never finish, but you have to keep on going, though. That's the thing. How do you really show that you really want the Torah? By keeping on going. And not stopping. That's the idea. Not how much you did, it's how long you did. Okay, that's the idea. So it says, if you learn lots of Torah in this world, they give you lots of reward. You understand? So, therefore, right, the person shouldn't say, this is a very big mistake. The big mistake? Some people say, I need Lamati Torah. I learned Torah today. I learned 2 halachot. I learned a little bit something Tehillim. I did something. And that's it, I'm finished. Who told you you're finished? If you do more, they'll give you more reward. The more you do, the more they reward you. So you shouldn't think you're finished. You never finished. What does that mean, you finished? You finished Torah? Nobody ever finishes the Torah. That's the idea. Huh? So a person has to know that, right? This is the way the system works. So goes on to say, let's go on a little bit. But also, you see from here another interesting point, which is related to this. We find the Gemara, Masechet Yoma, it says over there, who's considered to be the worst out of all the people, out of the Jews? Who's the worst? So it says Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, the worst is the one who learned Torah and then left the Torah. Tane Batavi. Why is that?
Could that be Shomer?
I don't know. I'm not so sure about what he did when he was young, but the point is, right, that when a person, that shows that it's a total disregard. Like you learned it. So you know the taste of Torah. You know how it tastes. You know how good it is. You know how beneficial it is. You know how great it is. You know how smart it is. And you just like to do something, like something else, to do business or, sell some goods, in the stock market. You went to the stock market? After you sat and learned Torah all day, you got the taste of Torah, you went out and did something else? Nobody worse than that. That's what Rabbi Shimon Yochai says. Nobody worse than that. You know why? Because you know what Torah is. They can't tell you. If I would have known what it is, then I would have done it. But I never got a taste of it. But you did get a taste of it, and you left it. You left out, went out of the yeshiva, and you wanted to do something, some business, some profession. Nobody worse than that. So you can say, why? Why is that the worst? What? I have to make a living. I have to go out, make it do a profession. Listen, I can't stay in the Torah all my life. Who's going to support me? Who's going to give me my support? So the answer is, that Hashem will support you. Why? If you know how good the Torah is, you know that the Torah can support you. You know that the Torah has the power to give you everything you need. It has the power to give you wealth and health and happiness. left that and you went to look for somewhere else in the material world. So says the Gemara, nobody worse than that. This is the number one ubeduri.
You can
know?
do both.
You know what I mean? Right, but if he was, the whole thing is like this, right? You can do both, and that's what they say, by the way, these guys. You know, the ones who go out. They say, yeah, we'll do a little bit of this, 50-50, What happens in the end, right? Little by little becomes 50-50, then 60-40, then 70-30, then 80-20, and all of a sudden, they have nothing left. You know what I mean? I'll just finish it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So this is the way it goes. Little by little, it goes down. But the truth is, even to do 50-50, it's not even good. Why? Because once you already get to that level, that you're studying and learning all day, and you know how good that is, that's also considered to be something really, really bad. 50% you left? Nothing worse than that. So you see from there, right, that this Torah is considered to be the number one occupation for the world. There's nothing else which comes to that, right? So regarding what? Regarding supporting, regarding supporting you, not supporting you, what does it say over there, right? Orech yamin bimina, usmola, osher bechavod. It says in the verse. What does that mean? That length of life, right? Long days, longevity. Gives you that also when you study Torah. It also gives you wealth and kavod and honor. All these good things come from the Torah. Eventually it comes. Sometimes, a person will start out and say, the problem is like this, right? People who don't have emunah, they're not so faithful. Well, I already learned, I didn't become rich. I didn't get wealthy. I didn't get honor. Nobody treats me with kavod. I don't know what's going on, So you know what it is, right? You got to stay with it till the end. Because what does it say? It says also in Pirkei Avot that we're studying, right, that a person who, when he's poor, eventually he'll keep it when he's rich as well. What does that mean? Eventually he'll get rich. Because he knew what it was like to keep it when he was poor. He was faithful enough to do that. He was faithful. So in the end he'll get rich. That's the idea. So the Torah has the power to make a person rich. There's no power to make somebody rich like Torah. That's what it says in Zohar Kadosh. And the wealth that comes from the Torah is not like the wealth that comes from... It says in the Zohar Kadosh, right? It says also in the Midrashim. There's two ways to get wealthy. One is like to go on to do business, do some, grab money over here, take over here, stock market, kinds of things, investments, boo, boo, ba, ba, go back and forth. Money grabbed over here, grab something over here. That money can disappear in no time. Easy come, easy go. Comes easy, goes easy. But the wealth that comes to a person from Torah, it stays, it stays forever. It stays all his life. Because it's a blessing from God. It's a different kind of a system altogether. So the wealth that comes from Torah is not like the wealth that comes from business or, trading. It's not the same thing. That stuff can go right away. But wealth that comes from Torah, it stays forever. That's the idea. Never disappears because it's a blessing from God. Birkat Hashem hi ta'ashir v'lo tavi etzev imam. That's what it says in the Mishlei. What does that mean? The blessing of God, it will make you rich and it won't bring any sadness to you. What does it mean, sadness? You won't have to toil for that. Why? Because Hashem brought it to you because you learned Torah. He didn't bring it to you because you did business or you did some trading or whatever. That's the idea. So again, right, we see the same concept, same theme. Goes on to say in Pirkei Avot even stronger things about the Torah. Right, so I'll go to the finale, right? About the Torah and Pirkei Avot. Some very powerful words, which people, by the way, Pirkei Avot, everybody likes to study. All the religious people like to study Pirkei Avot, but there are certain things which they kind of skip over and they ignore a little bit. So this is one of the sections which are ignored in the Pirkei Avot, and not. So therefore, we have an obligation to reveal these parts of Pirkei Avot, so people should know what's written over there. Okay, so let's see what it says. This is the last parak of Pirkei Avot. Look what it says. So, listen to the words here. Rabbi Meir Omer, right? It says Rabbi Meir, and that's what it says. Kol ha'osek b'Torah lishma zochel dvarim harbeh. It says, whoever studies Torah for the sake of heaven, not for alternative motives, right? He gets very, very good. So what are the good things that he gets over here? Right? So he says, not only that, but the truth is that a person who studies Torah, l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven, the whole world was really created for him, as we already mentioned. So he says, what does he call that person? Nikra re'ar, ahuv, ohevet hamakom. He's considered to be like the friend of God, God's friend, the beloved of God. Ohevet habriot. He loves the creations. He loves the creation that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created. V'sameach et ha'makom. He gladdens the God. He also gladdens the people as well, right? The populace as well. Person who learns Torah. And also he gets good characteristics. What does that mean? He becomes humble. It improves his character as well. Develops his character, the Torah. It has the power to develop everything. Right? And it makes you a righteous person, tzaddik. The only way to be a tzaddik is to have Torah. Otherwise you cannot be a tzaddik. You don't know what you're doing. And that's the idea. Chassid, it also makes you into pious, yashar and straight, v'ne'eman and faithful, and also distances him from sin. When a person studies Torah, it takes him away from the sin. Otherwise, he doesn't know what's sin, what's not sin. He doesn't know. He can fall into any pit. That's the idea, So it takes away from sin. And also brings them to merit, to good things. Then also people get wisdom from him. They acquire from him wisdom, a person who has Torah. Bina ugvura, and also understanding and might. Also, a person who has Torah, it gives him rule. He becomes a ruler, becomes a king, right? Like it says in the Gemara, Man melache rabbanan. What does that mean? Who are the real kings? The rabbis are the kings. Why is that? Because they really rule over the world. It's not like those, those Bidens, and the Obamas and the Boomers and the camels, camelas, they're not the ones who rule over the world. It's the Chamim, they rule over the world.
You really think he's going to be president? Biden, and she's going to be. Can you imagine that woman ruling over us?
Oh my God, pretty scary. Okay. Also, he becomes very he can investigate things. To get to the truth, to find out the truth. Also, they reveal to him the secrets of the Torah. Eventually, right? That's what happens. A person who devotes himself to Torah, eventually they reveal to him the secrets. What are we talking about, the secrets? What it says in the Zohar Kadosh, in the Kabbalah, things like this, Kabbalistic. That's the idea. Also, he becomes like somebody who can also deduce all kinds of things, the power of deduction. He can learn one thing from another, learn from here something else, and develop his own ideas, build on top of the Torah ideas of the Torah, and make new ideas, develop new things, chidushim, novel ideas. That's the idea. Goes on to say, and it becomes the hu tzanu, and becomes also humble, very meek, timid. Becomes right. The erech ruach, and also becomes patient. He has patience. He doesn't lose his temper. He becomes more, calm, chilled out. Everything doesn't fly off. Start yelling at you. Georgian style. If you shame him, he forgive you. You say something rough with him. You say something. My friend, you forgive. You have to forgive a little bit sometimes. You know what I mean? It says, right, that it raises him above the creation. He makes him he becomes a pinnacle of creation. Hapiska. Piska means, right? In Hebrew, it means the pinnacle, the top of the mountain. Hapiska. So that's what it is, right? That's the idea. Amar Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, b'chol yom bat kol yotzet ma'al chorev u'machrezet ve'omeret. So says Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, every day, right, comes out a voice from heaven. What does it say? Every day comes out like this. Every day. Oy lahem lebriot me'bona shel Torah. Woe is it to the ones that don't study Torah, right? Woe is to them. Woe is upon them. Because whoever doesn't toil in the Torah, he's considered to be like Abashed, somebody who's excommunicated, thrown out, like he's not in the.
I guess that goes for the whole world. I mean, most.
שנאמר, נזם זהב באף חזיר, אישה יפה ושאת לב. מאומר מלוחות מעשה אלוהים המה, מכתב במכתב אלוהים הוא, חרוט על הלוחות. אל תקרא חרוט אלא חירות. So he says also, he extrapolates from this verse, שאין לך בן חורין, אלא מי שעוסק בתלמוד תורה. You don't have a person who's really like a free person. Somebody who's a Torah. Why is that? Because a person who doesn't learn Torah, he's enslaved with the Yetzer Hara from the evil inclination, He controls him. Self from the evil inclination is to learn Torah. You're really free, you're really emancipated if you study Torah. Otherwise you're in the, in the webs of the Yetzer Hara, of the evil inclination. It's got you in its web. It's got a grab on you, you can't get out of it. This is what it's saying. Okay, let's go on. So it says, it says also the one who toils in Torah, he gets elevated. So now it comes and tells you, right, how important is the Torah? How much do we value the Torah? That if you learn from somebody like one chapter of Torah, or you learn from him one verse or even one letter from the alphabet, it says you have to give him kavod. Because you learn from him something which is considered, one little element of the Torah. You have to give him kavod. It says in the Zohar Kadosh that, the big rabbis who used to go around and study Torah, if they would hear some Torah even from like a little kid, or, somebody who's not very learned, but they didn't know this Torah before, they learned it from him first time. What they would do is they would honor him all his life like that. Every time they would see him, they would stand up for him. Why is that? Because they learned from him one thing in Torah, one chidush, one chapter, one halacha, one letter, one word, whatever it is. They would honor him for that. They would stand up for him. That's what it says over here in Pirkei Avot. Let's go on. So it says, "Sheken matzinu b'David melech Israel." So that's what we find in King David, right? What happened with King David? Shelo lamad me'Achitofel ela shnei devarim bilvad. He only learned from Achitofel, who was his advisor, chief advisor. You know what I mean? Like a Bannon kind of guy, right? So he was the chief advisor. So he learned from him what? He learned from him only two things. Two things he learned from him in Torah. It says, by the way, in the Pirkei Avot, it says he learned from him two things, not two halachot. Because these things are not really halachot, what he learned from him. They're not really laws. It's like proper conduct, from the Torah. Just proper conduct. He learned from him two things. And because of that, even though they were not halachot, even though they were not Gemara or, Kabbalah or something like that. Not something really like major, Just two proper things, conduct. Derech Eretz, Zdiloba, Proper conduct. Nevertheless, he gave him kavod to Achitofel because of that. Right? So what did he call him? Rabbo, Alufo, he called him his... You're my rabbi, you're my teacher. Why? Because he just learned two things from him. Let's go on. So it says, so if you learn anything from your friend, whether it's a halacha, or one chapter, or one verse, or anything from the Torah, or even one letter, that you have to give him kavod. All the more so. Right? That's the idea. So it says, so the question is, what really gives a person kavod in this world? What gives him honor? You may think, it's because he hit the stock market. He got rich, he got wealthy, he became a billionaire. Is that what gives him honor? So it says, "En kavod la Torah." The only real honor in this world is Torah. That knowing Torah is the only honor. There's no other honor in this world. The real honor. Shneimar kavod chachamim minchalu tumimi minchalu tov. Then tov la Torah. It says also there's nothing good in this world except Torah. That's really the only good thing in the world. And all the rest is just illusion. Illusion, delusion. The only real good thing in the world is Torah. Right? This is what Pirkei Avot tells you. Where does it say that? It says in the verse, Ki lekachtot natati lachem, Torati al ta'azovu. It says in the Chumash, right? I gave you a good thing, don't leave my Torah. That's what it says. Kachi darka shel Torah. It says, so this is the way of the Torah. It says in Pirkei Avot. What's the way of the Torah? How do you live a life of Torah? So what is it telling you over here, right? Eat simple foods, just sleep like simple, eat simple, and sleep simple, and drink simple, just be a simple person. Don't go for like fancy foods, going to French restaurants, all kinds of things like this. Eat a hamburger, something, let's go, weiter, eat some kebabs, some wraps. And go, you don't have to look for fancy, restaurants and all kinds of things. This doesn't help you with Torah, you understand? To acquire the Torah, you have to be a simple person. Just go for the simple things in life, Eat a hot dog today, tomorrow a hamburger, and next have some tuna fish the next day, What do you need all these fancy foods for? You need all that stuff to survive? It's all nonsense, right? It's all worthless. The chayet is also, you should live like, life of suffering, In other words, don't let your body be too comfortable. You have to suffer a little bit, You have to rough it. No pain, no gain. That's the idea, right? That's the way it works with the Torah. There has to be a little bit of suffering there involved. You know what I mean? If you're too comfortable, you don't want to learn Torah. You have no desire for Torah. It's that little discomfort that gives you, the desire to acquire the Torah. That's the idea, So it says, it says, if you do like that, if you live like that, praiseworthy are you. It's going to be good for you. You're going to have a good life like that. Living a simple life, just simple foods, simple life, everything, nothing too fancy, and also a little bit, roughing it a little bit, going rough. That's the idea. Okay, let's go on a little bit. We're almost finished. He says, don't. If you're studying Torah, right? Don't seek out all kinds of big things for yourself. Bigger than life, to be president, vice president, be the president of the synagogue, the president, Queensboro president, I don't know, whatever it is, right? All kinds of titles, to get this title, that title. Because why? If you're studying Torah and you're looking for these political titles or these communal titles, you're making a big mistake. Why is that? What's the reason why? Don't go after the kavod of these people, the honor of these people that we mentioned. You'll tell me, says, don't go and desire to go to the table of kings, the way eat the fancy foods, the kings, the president, meals, their $400 bottles of wine, like Netanyahu, over there. He drinks, whatever, things like this. Right? You don't need all that stuff. Why? You shouldn't even want that. Why? What's the reason? Why? Your crown as a chacham is bigger than theirs. They may have a crown, politically, whatever, or socially, but your crown in Torah is bigger than all of those crowns. So therefore, when you have a desire to live their life, you're downgrading yourself. You know what I mean? It's a downgrade. It's not an upgrade to become like them. You're lowering yourself. This is the idea. Okay, let's go on a little bit. So it says, he says, you should know that the one who told you to study Torah, your boss, the God, he will definitely pay you your reward for that. You shouldn't think that anything will get away. So, we have three branches of rulership in Israel. We have Torah, we have Malchut, the kingdom, and we have Kemunah, Kohanim, the priests. So which one is the biggest one? So it says, the Torah is bigger than all of them. It's bigger than the kingdom, right? So what do you think? Oh, I want to be king. I want to be president. You want to be? You're Talmid Chacham. You're bigger than all of them, and you're looking to be a president. So how do we know, by the way, that the Torah is greater than all the others, all the other types of rule in the world? Because it says like this, right? Because because to be a king you need like 30 virtues, 30 types of virtues to be a king in the world, right? And what about Kohen? To be Kohen you need 24 types of virtues to be Kohen. So king has 30 virtues, Kohen has 24 virtues, Chacham have, right? So you need to be Chacham, You need to have 48 virtues you need to have. So it's bigger than all of them. It's twice as big as the Keuna, and bigger also than the Malchut. It's bigger than them. So what are the virtues? He now lists them one by one. In order to acquire the Torah. Right, it says like this. Talmud, you have to study. Right? You have to be a bookworm, study. Bishmiyat Ozen, you have to listen to people. Barichat Sfatayim, you have to prepare your words. Bebinat Haleb, also you have to understand your heart. Be'ema, you have to have fear of God. Be'ira, be'anava, and also humility. Be'simcha, you have to be happy. You have to have happiness, you have to have joy, studying the Torah. Be'tahara, you have to be pure. Be'shimu chachamim, you have to also go with the big rabbis and learn from them, Not just to say, I'm going to learn Torah by myself. You have to go to the big chachamim and learn from them. That's the idea, Be'eshuv, and also you have to be like calm and, good disposition, calm disposition. Not to get hasty. Be'mikra, also to read. Be'mishnah, study the Mishnah. Be'miut sechora. You also have to do very little, like labor, other labors. Labor. You have to diminish it, minimize it as much as possible. That's what it says also, right? In the Pirkei Avot and also in the Talmud, it says, diminish your labor and increase your Torah. What does that mean? Most of the day, you should be learning Torah, and only a portion of the day you can do some little labor. That's the idea. Also, right, B'miut derech eretz, also, right, not much like worldly occupations, very little. Worldly affairs, all kinds of things like this, or, sexual things, very little, keep it to a minimum. Just you have one wife, be with her, you don't have to extramarital affairs, all kinds of things, right? Extras, bonuses, you don't need that. That's the idea, right? B'miut tanug, also, right, don't take too much pleasure from the world, Minimal pleasure. Not too much. B'miut shena, also, right, don't sleep too much. If you need 6 hours, don't sleep 8 hours. If you need 8 hours, don't sleep 10 hours. Don't sleep more than you need. Okay? B'miut sicha, also, don't talk too much. A person who talks a lot cannot study Torah. You know why? Because he's all the time, he's like, going like a motor. Talking, wasting time talking. All kinds of nonsense. So a person has to learn how to shut his mouth and listen more, to acquire more than to talk. That's the idea. But mitzvah also not to like to joke too much, A little bit joke is okay, not too much, what I mean? The whole day cannot be a joke. You know what I mean? You can do 5 minutes. That's the idea. Right? Also have to be patient. Right? Belev tov, you have to have a good heart for Torah, to acquire the Torah. You also have to believe in the rabbis. You have to believe in the words of the rabbis. If a person only believes in the written Torah, but he says, the rabbis I don't believe, like Yeshua Imachshemo. This was his problem, you know what I mean? He says, no, the rabbis I don't want. I don't want them. You don't want the rabbis? Okay, then you're not a Talmid Chacham. The rabbis are the ones who own the Torah. They're the ones who learn the Torah. They're the ones who are holding the Torah. What they tell you, you're not a part of the Torah. There's no way to circumvent this issue. You know what I mean? To say, I'll do it without the rabbis. You cannot do it without the rabbis. Torah. You need the rabbis. Okay, let's go on. Right? Kabbalat HaYisurin, also you have to know how to receive, right, suffering, Like in other words, if they send you some suffering in this world, take it easy, don't take it with a bad heart. Take it with a good spirit. You know what I mean?
Depends on that.
Don't say, why did God do this to me? Oh my God, Hey, chill out, man. What do you think? It came for nothing? There's a reason why everything happens. So a person has to, receive that with love, and say, if it happened to me, it must be that I deserve it. So I'm happy about it. Also, a person who knows his place. What does that mean? He doesn't think he's too high, too exalted. He knows who he is. He knows a person who knows what he really is. You're not as don't dream about, fantasize about, being in some kind of a exalted position. You are just a regular guy, So then why you think you're so great, Arrogant. I'm the best man, Believe me, man, I'm the best. Who made you the best? What made you the best? You're just a regular guy like everybody else. What? Don't think you're the best. Know your place. Be realistic about what you are. Don't live in a fantasy world. You know what I mean? It has to be also. You have to be happy with your lot. Whatever God gave you, be happy with that. This is your lot in this world. If God gave you, this is what you deserve. So then why? What's the reason to be angry or to be upset or to be thankless? To be ungrateful.
It's human nature to want more.
That's it. So a person has to overcome the human nature. That's the idea. You know what I mean? In order to acquire the Torah, right? Goes on to say, they all say exactly the Arab, and also you have to put a fence around, the words of the Torah in order to protect the Torah. What does that mean? Some have to do a little bit extra because you know that you have a weak spot. So if you come a little bit too close to that sin, you'll go over the overboard. So you have to make a fence around it and protect yourself. Right? Look what it says. Right? He doesn't believe himself that he's something special. He doesn't say, oh yeah, I did such good things. I've done such great things in my life. What are you bragging about? People like to brag. I did this and I did that. What did you do? Just give me a break. Sit down and do your job. Don't be full of yourself. In other words, this is not the way to acquire the Torah. Okay, ahuv. You have to be beloved by God. You have to be right. Oheveta makom. You have to love God. Oheveta briot. You have to love people also. You have to be a lover of people. You shouldn't hate people. You should look at them and love them, and to try to uplift them, not to try to destroy them. This is the idea.
Where are you reading that particular?
Pirkei Avot. It's Pirkei Avot.
Okay, it's Pirkei Avot, right?
Yeah.
Why is it that our, brothers and sisters claim that the Torah never taught love? That's why That's why Yeshua came to teach us love.
Put them in the garbage.
No,
so,
but it's right there. Obviously, they don't know it, right?
That's for sure.
So the Torah does teach love.
So it says like this, right? Ohevet makom. You have to love Hashem. You have to love people. Ohevet tzedakot. You have to love also righteousness. You have to love being straight. There are people who like to cheat. To go circumvent. To do all kinds of tricks.
Yeah.
Scammers. You shouldn't love that. A person who wants to acquire the Torah has to love the truth. He has to love emet. He has to be always looking for the truth. Also, you should be straight. You have to love straightness, being straightforward. Also, you should love rebuke. People who rebuke you and tell you this is your problem. Let me tell you what your problem is. So don't preach to me. Hey, what are you, preacher? Why not? Let him tell you. Maybe he can help you. Maybe he can explain to you something that you didn't know. You weren't noticing something. So listen to him. This is also a part of acquiring the Torah, that you should take criticism, what's the problem? Nobody can criticize you, you're the best, nobody can touch me, nobody can tell me anything. If you're like that, you're like you're living in a fantasy world. You know what I mean? That's very bad. Okay, let's go on. Also, you should go away from kavod, from honor, Don't look to be honored, They should put you at the head of the table, and say, oh, you're such a big chacham, you're such a big rabbi, you're such a big philanthropist to all these causes. What are you looking to be praised for, by people? You should run away from that. When people start praising you, walk away. What, you want to bask in the compliment? This is not the way of the Torah, you know what I mean? You shouldn't want by anybody. Just treat them like everybody else, Why would you want that? Let's go on. And also, when you study Torah, don't become arrogant. Don't say, I'm the only one who knows anything. Nobody else knows besides me. You know what I mean? Excuse me, but, there are other people also. So, what does that mean? You shouldn't become arrogant and say, only I'm right, only I say the truth. You know what I mean? Becoming arrogant in studies like that. The Rambam was wrong, Rashi was wrong, the Ramban was wrong, the Tosfot was wrong, everybody was wrong, I'm right. This is not the way to become a chacham. You have to humble yourself, That's the idea. Okay. Also, he's not happy, to give people instruction. What does that mean? Like people ask him, about this halacha and that halacha. He's not happy. Why? What does that mean, not happy? That means that he doesn't like to be, he doesn't like to be the one who gives all the answers, but he has no choice because he has no choice so he does it as as a job, you know what I mean? But not that he's happy, to be like the problem solver, Oh yeah, I know everything. I'm the problem solver, I'm the fixer, like that guy, Yeah, I'm the fixer of everything. Don't be a fixer, You shouldn't be so happy. What are you happy about? They gave you something to answer. Okay, answer it, but don't try to be like, oh, I'm the one, I'm the address for all the questions. Bring everything to me, That's the idea. Also, right, when a person is doing something, your friend, help him out. In other words, like pitch in. Pitch in. That's the idea. Also, right, make people more righteous. Help them to develop themselves, to improve themselves. And also help them to get to the truth. Your friend, don't just give him compliments, and lie to him. Oh yeah, you're such a good guy. We love you. You're the best. But he's really a criminal. What are you complimenting him for? Tell him the truth. Tell him to get to the truth. I love you. Just saying some good things to everybody. What are you saying good for? What? Because what? You want them to love you? You want them to accept you? That's not the way to be. You have to be a lover of the truth. So tell him the truth about what he really is. Don't tell him illusions. You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay. Also, right, make peace. Make peace amongst people. And also contemplate your studies, go deep into it. He asks and he answers. He hears, and he adds more wisdom because he hears people, he listens to them. He learns in order that he should teach also to others. He also learns because he wants to uphold the Torah, not just in theory, Yeah, that was so interesting, Wow, I was inspired by that. Who cares if you were inspired? Did you do what the rabbi told you? You were inspired. That helps you? What does it help you that you were inspired? If you didn't do what the rabbi said, it was a waste of time for you. You didn't do nothing. What's the point, right? So don't make it a Torah, like just exercise in theory. It's not an exercise in theory. It has to be practically upheld. That's the idea. Says he makes his rabbi also wiser. What does that mean? He asks him questions, and the rabbi does these wise questions that he asks. And also a person who knows how to properly get to the point, get to the bottom line. And he also, when he says something that was said by a certain rabbi, he mentions his name. He gives him credit for that. That's also considered to be like kavod. It says in the Gemara, right? Whoever does that, he brings redemption to the world. It brings geulah to the world. The world is redeemed in the zchut that he gives credit to the people who said what they said. Okay. Halamata kol haomer davar b'shem amro מביא גאולה לעולם. משנה בעצם זה בסדר. כדאי לתורה שהיא נותנת חיים לאוכלוסייה. Says, look what it says in the end. It says that it gives life to the ones who do it. בעולם הזה ובעולם הבא. In this world and the next world as well. שנאמר, חיים הם למוצאיהם, ולכל בשרו מרפא ואומר, ריפות תהי לשעריך, ושיקוי לצמותיך, ואומר, עץ חיים היא ולמחזיקים בה. It's a tree of life, the ones who hold on to it, ותומכי המאושר, and the ones who also support it. So what do we see from there? That the only reason why Kadosh Baruch Hu created the world is the Torah. So for him, this is the central theme of the world. This is the only purpose. This is the only fulfillment of the purpose of the world. Anything else, So a person has to only be concentrating on that all his life. The rest of it, the rest of life is just so you can get to the Torah. Okay, so I slept a little bit. I ate a little bit, I did this, whatever I had to do. But all this I'm doing in order that I should get to Torah study, in the end. Because this is the purpose of life. This is the idea. So that's why it says in the Shulchan Aruch, I will finish with this. It says in the Shulchan Aruch that even though when a person does mundane activities in his life, right? He sleeps, he eats, goes to the bathroom, excuse my language, takes care of his body, he goes to exercise, he goes this, So he says all these things, mundane activities that a person does, can become mitzvot. How does it become a mitzvah, all these things? I ate some, kebabs, it became a mitzvah. I went to the bathroom, it became mitzvah. I went to sleep, became mitzvah. What's mitzvah to sleep? Where is the commandments in the Torah to sleep? So you know what the answer is? It says in Shulchan Aruch, that if a person is doing all these things in order to serve God, go in the ways of God, to do Torah and mitzvot, so therefore, all these things are doing like a supporting role in order you should get to that level to get to the Torah and mitzvot. So therefore, everything becomes a mitzvah. That's what it says in Shulchan Aruch. It's halakha. So what does that mean? That it all depends on Rachaman Ali Babai. Kadosh Baruch Hu wants in your heart that you should have the right intentions. So what should my intentions be? I do everything for the sake of Torah and mitzvot. If I do everything for that, everything becomes a mitzvah. But if I don't have that intention in my mind to study Torah and to do mitzvot, just to go and do some crimes, go looting, and all kinds of things, right? To go rob people and scam people and all kinds of things, to kill people, to be a sinner, all kinds of things. You should know, by the way, that also another reason why the world is in such a bad condition. Because, it says in the Gemara that, Kadosh Baruch Hu knows that there is homosexuality in this world. He knows what it is. It's considered to be a very big sin. But he says the one thing, is used to redeem the goyim about that. Homosexuality, but they don't make like a marriage contract and marry a man to a man and a woman to a woman. Now they're doing that too. You understand? They went over that threshold. This is like a destruction of the world as well, that they're making man and man married with each other, same-sex marriages. When you cross this threshold, it's destruction already,
Well, now Kamala and Biden will take that to the next level.
Yeah, so this is the idea, What they want to do? They want to remove everything, all of godliness from this world, everything. So the point is, as we said, right, that if your intentions are due to the bad, so then everything you're doing is also bad. All the things that you do, your mundane activities, are also for the bad purpose. Everything is a sin. But when your purpose is to do good things, Torah and mitzvot, so then also all the mundane things which you do to come to support that, they're all also considered to be mitzvot. That's the idea, So jackpot and gain everything, or it can just the opposite, right? Lose everything. On the other hand, right? Kadosh Baruch Hu should give us a chance to uphold the Torah and keep the Torah, and by way of, you should know. Right, we're upholding the world, like it says in the Zohar Kadosh. Who are the ones who really uphold the world? Who are the people about the Chachamim? Because they study Torah. If it wasn't for the Chachamim that study Torah, the world wouldn't exist. So what does that mean? Goes into Chacham and he disgraces him. Doesn't appreciate what he is. It's in his zechut, it's in his merit that person is alive. He wouldn't even be alive if it wasn't for that Chacham. Studying the Torah. So who holds up the world? The Chachamim. That's the idea. So the ones who study so therefore, ones who study Torah in yeshivot, in the kolelim, the world wouldn't exist. So in order to gain this world and the world to come, we have to keep the Torah, we have to study the Torah, we have to support the Torah. Whatever it is that we can do, right? In every way, in every fashion that we can do, according to our power, according to our strength. Hashem should give us the koach to do it. Amen ve'amen. To you and your families.
Amen, amen, amen.
Health, wealth, and happiness. Amen ve'amen.
Amen.